Hi guys, I'm Kat.
And I'm Emma.
And thank you for joining us once again on the Dead Parent Club podcast.
Each week we're going to be talking about what it's like to be members of the Dead Parent Club and chatting to some brilliant guests about their grieving journeys.
We'll also be hearing from people far more qualified than us. They can give you some top advice on navigating this new normal.
So welcome everyone to the Dead Parent Club.
Now this week we are joined by somebody we both know very well and somebody that you might recognise from previous episodes in season 1. So we wanted to cover basically what it was like for siblings that are grieving and how siblings grieve so differently. I myself have brothers and Emma has a twin brother and an older brother called Ben. So this week we are joined by Emma's twin brother, Sam.
Yeah, because I know that me and Sam have both been on different grieving journeys, and I think with this conversation today, it's likely that we'll both learn things about each other and the process we've gone through that we didn't know before.
Definitely, and I think it'll be kind of a useful tool for anybody out there who is, has a brother or a sister and you're kind of thinking, why are we grieving so differently? Like, you would think that maybe you want to talk about it more or you don't talk about it openly maybe.
So welcome to the human that I shared a womb with. It's my twin brother Sam. Hiya Sam.
Hello sis, you alright Kat?
Hi, welcome back.
Hello again. Hello.
Not many people get a take two, so bless.
I know that we're rolling the red carpet out here for you, Sam. So
I'm getting spoiled, aren't I?
But just, I guess we've got to start, Sam, with your version of what happened with Mum's illness
definitely.
And what happened with her passing away.
I think my version, it was interesting listening to you on the first episode of season 2 because I realised you knew more than me, I think, about Mum was actually going to die. But no, if I remember, my memories were very much Mum was ill for a long time, obviously, from 13 to how old for the first time, was it?
Well, she was poorly. She got poorly in when we were 12, and then she recovered after about 18 months, and then it came back when we were 17, so about 4 years later.
But no, in my head, Mum wasn't going to die until that car journey, really. So yeah, I think
the car journey on the way to
on the way to the hospital. Yeah, it was kind of just the feeling in the car gave it away for me. And then we obviously got to the hospital, and it was obviously glaringly obvious. But
nobody sat you down and was like, "Your mum's going to die."
I was never specifically told that, and obviously it sounds like Emma was aware, and that actually I remember I was pulled over on the side of the road listening to it, and I was quite shocked when Emma knew and I didn't. And I don't think it was done intentionally. I think a lot of the information was being relayed through our nan and granddad, which they were trying to, I guess, keep us positive and stuff. But I always remember one incident coming out of college about probably 2 weeks before she died, and I was on the phone to Nana, and Nana was like, your mum's picking up, she's doing well. And she didn't imply that she was going to be okay, but that whole call gave me a feeling of this is good. So, it was never obvious to me, even as Emma remember, because I know you went to visit her in the day before she died in the night, that she was very up and about. And I think you might have had this Cat, just before your mum died, that they almost have a high, don't they?
A few days before, my mum was kind of like talking and cracking a few weird jokes about drinking milk to breastfeed when you have children.
Nice. And
what a memory.
But no, I'd been in the hospital bed with Mum, and she was, she's all there. She was talking, absolutely fine. I think, if I remember rightly, we'd been a few days before, and it looked like she was going then. But in my head, I thought, she's got better again on that day before the final night. So I left, and what stuck with me, and I think I remember saying this on the first time I came on, was that it haunted me for a while that I left really quick, because I was just turned 18, I'd just passed my driving test. I forget exactly what my mates were wanting me to go and do with them, but I left quite early, and then we were back there in the middle of the next night, and obviously at that point she was already basically brain dead and gone. It was all quite an experience.
What I remember though, Sam, is that although you might not have known Mum was going to die, you'd had this lovely memory with her where because she was obviously bedbound. There were wipes, I think, in the hospital room, and you had been wiping her and helping her clean herself, I think, hadn't you? And she was enjoying it. And I remember thinking, because, you know, none of us really knew that was when she was going to pass away the next day. And to be honest with you, the only reason I thought Mum was going to die was because I overheard a conversation. I was sat in the kitchen, there was a conversation taking place in the dining room between Nana, Grandad, Steve and Ben. That is when I ran upstairs and said to Claire, rang Claire, my friend, and said, my mum's going to die. But I remember after she'd passed away thinking how lovely it was that you'd actually got that memory with her. So in your mind, it's interesting that you perceive it as you rushed off. But I always remember thinking how happy Mum was that she had this memory of you helping wipe her and clean her and laughing. Do you remember that?
Yeah, well, that was, to be fair, that was the day before she died in that night. And I remember doing it, so basically bathed her with wipes because she couldn't do that herself. But you know, I'm okay with it now. In hindsight, it's been what is it now? 12 years, I think, nearly.
13.
13.
Good maths.
Sorry, Mum. I hope you're not offended by that. But yeah, no, I know what you're saying. But in that moment, that lingered with me for a while. But I guess that kind of offsets me racing off that I had that moment with her. So you not? Go on, Kat.
This is just really interesting that this is the first time that you two have had that specific conversation about Sam saying he thought you knew. Like, 'cause I bet Sam, not to be the devil's advocate here, but I bet Sam was a bit like, why did she not tell me?
No. To be honest, I didn't know Emma knew specifically until I sat and listened to the season 2, episode 1, where Emma really came in. And I don't know, it's weird because we're really open, aren't we, sis, about our emotions. But I feel like the specifics of that, I don't know, maybe we haven't talked about it loads, but I enjoyed listening to Emma's side. Like, I was nodding along and I was like, and I learned a lot. And even though that's my twin who we speak about a lot of things, it's strange how we avoided clearly certain questions.
Do you know what it was for me? And this is why even now I feel really emotional hearing you talk. I think the reason I've never had that conversation specifically about that night Mum died and that kind of time is because I think it hurts me so much when I think about it that I'll get upset if I think about how hurt you are. So I've always, going against everything I believe in, I've never wanted to bring it up with you because I hate the idea of, I know it hurts you and I don't want to hear it. Just selfishly, I don't want my brother being upset.
As somebody that knows both of you quite well, I know that you're both very open about your feelings, but we're also so open about our feelings in a way that becomes partly jokey.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like when you're so like, I talk about death all the time, but actually talking about the nitty gritty of what happened and how you felt straight after that happened and how you both dealt with it differently actually brings up so many painful emotions that you would rather just kind of not go. And I think a lot of people listening to this, have got siblings, me included, will be able to resonate with that.
I think, it's really good for me and Emma to reflect. Obviously, our Nana died last June, and Emma, I think, has realised we deal with it in some different ways. That Emma posts videos of Nana on our WhatsApp group, and I'm very much out of sight, out of mind, whereas Emma likes to see the things. And I think, for me, it sounds so brutal, but I never forget that Mum died. But maybe not having those conversations, like Emma said, it avoids the brutalness of bringing it up, and then the emotions that we maybe try and press down, even after all this time. I don't know.
Yeah, just on that, I created a WhatsApp group recently that was called Memories of Mum and Nana. And I was like, for me, my twin brother and my older brother, and I was like, right, guys,
forcing it upon them. Like, here you go.
Right, because I was like, right, this is a great opportunity to share photos, videos, and memories.
I get it; it's a nice sentiment.
Yeah, but so far there's only one entry and it's from me.
I think the same thing would happen if I tried to do it with my
you just
my
get
brothers.
ignored. They told me it's a nice idea, but that's it.
So we've talked about then the day before your mum died. So what about the day that she died? And both of you were there, right?
Yeah.
When it happened.
Exactly.
But so how did you react straight after that, Sam? Like what were your initial movements or thoughts after that?
So I forget the exact time, but I remember I'd stayed at one of my really, really close friends, and I'd got picked up from that house that night. So yeah, we got there early hours of the morning, I think, and I do remember it being light, right? And obviously this is in March, so and I think Emma highlighted that point, that my first reaction was to leave the room. I think if I remember rightly, we waited until she'd fully gone, and there's that kind of awful. I call it a death rattle. I don't know if that's the official term, but
Yeah, it is.
I can't listen to that on any sort of hospital programs anymore. It scares the shit out of me, frankly. But and then after that, I walked outside and just sat on a bench. I think I rang a few of my friends. I rang my friend Will, and it was really early, but he answered. And I remember him going into his mum and dad's room because he's still 18. He's still really a kid. And they were more upset than me. Like, I was saying it's clear as day, like I am now, calm, cool. My mum's just died, and Will started crying. And this is really in the morning. Then I heard Will's mum and dad start crying. And I'm just really relaxed, like, it's all right, guys. Just like as if they're the one who's lost a parent.
Instantly, you become the one that's consoling other people.
Oh, yeah.
Like, don't worry about it, I'm fine.
But I think I remember where I stood, and I remember where I stood because I stood in the exact same place when Nana died last June. Emma's probably told you, Kat, that Nana died in the same ward as Mum, in the same hospital. All that time later. So yeah, it's kind of like that must be my go-to grieving spot in the car park of the hospital. But yeah, I remember discussing with Will. Even then, it sounds really odd now, but I was saying, like, I'm going to run a marathon for charity for cancer. That was actually one of the first conversations I had. Now, I don't have the best knees, as you both know, so that never actually happened.
That's very much your personality type, though. You're very much a doer.
Yeah, sure.
Like, your way of coping would be like, have a structure in place to get something done to feel better about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Sam, obviously you've changed a lot since Mum died, I think. I feel like you have, and I think I have too. Do you think me and you grieve and respond in different ways?
I think the WhatsApp group says it all.
Yeah, I don't know, I think there's different aspects to it, isn't it? Like, we have very similar personality we're so open, like Kat was saying, and I guess our humour around it is similar. But I guess, I feel like maybe you're willing to talk about the ins and outs and the nitty gritties more than me, because like I say, I have that kind of out of sight, out of mind kind of approach. But yeah, I think maybe, or do you think? I think we do have different sides, but at the same time, we share quite a similar personality as well.
Yeah, I think we are both very similar, but. Yeah, I think also with that, we are also sensitive to not just how much it hurts us, but how much it hurts, like, the other person, you. Like, I'm conscious, I would probably be more open speaking about the nitty gritty with some of my friends than with you, because I know that it would hurt them less than it would hurt you. And even though that's counterproductive almost, because actually to talk about the nitty gritty means that you're airing some of the most painful bits, and with that comes a bit of relief sometimes.
Yeah,
but
I get that.
it's such is the way that we grieve. How do you feel like, because I've seen you from being your twin sister, from my point of view, I've watched you grow a lot since Mum died. I know we both went to the same university, and we weren't that close then, really, were we? But then
It's news to me.
and I've well, like I say, in my opinion,
I know what you're saying.
and no, but you've changed a lot as a human being. I think again, in my experience, you might disagree, but you used to be more of a closed book with things, and you held back and you were more reserved. And I think you held a lot more in. And I think you didn't quite know who you were for a period after, which is really natural because you'd lost one of the most significant figures in your life. But I feel like now you've carved your way into this identity that has been partly born out of the loss that you've experienced.
I mean, you think about Sam being like a conveyancer he went to uni to do or something?
Quantity surveying, yeah.
Quantity surveying. I mean,
Yeah.
what the,
I mean, I'll be honest.
Thinking about that now is like,
Yeah.
Wouldn't be farther removed.
I think I remember when me and Emma got our college results, and I think we were just happy to get away, weren't we? Although, and I know you were saying back then we weren't really close, but I liked knowing you were literally on the other side of the court at my university halls. But I think my logic there was must do something practical if I'm going to get into this amount of data quantity surveying, and then obviously swanned off to Australia for a year, didn't I? And I think I learnt the difference between kind of what's expected of you through social norms and actually doing what you enjoy. And I guess that's where meaning for me became very important in what I do, which you both, I guess, will feel personally as well, if that makes sense.
you've kind of mentioned that your mum died. you were doing your A levels, weren't you? Soon after you went to uni, was there at any point for you a time when you were like, my mum's dead, like I'm not gonna see her again? Or do you think your grief has like continued to trickle out over the past 13 years?
Yeah, I don't. I think you always feel like they've gone on an extended holiday, and I think there's certain things that no matter how much time passes, you get to this kind of point where you accept it. I don't know. I think if I'm really honest, I think I've found it easier to, if I compare the death of my nana, who was basically like another mother, I found that easier to accept in some respects. And with mum, I guess, if I'm really being honest, I've shelved a lot of that and compressed a lot of that, and I think that's what caused a lot of stress for me. Obviously, at the end of university, I got diagnosed with colitis, which is a stress-based disorder. Really strange. I went for 2 root canals a couple of years ago, and at the end of it, the dentist was like, "Can I ask you a question?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." And he's like, "Have you been stressed for a long time?" Right? And I said, "I guess so." And I actually just bluntly went, "My mum died when I was 18," and he was like, "Oh, okay." And he said, "I said why?" And he said, "Because your teeth have ground down on one side, and that's a sign of stress." So, I don't. You'll probably both agree with this. And I think in the moment you don't realize you're stressed, so you look back and think, "I was stressed," and maybe still am on some levels, but it has physical ramifications as well.
Yeah, 100%.
How much do you remember of mum, Sam?
That's a question, eh? I know I was saying like out of sight, out of mind is a wonderful thing, but I guess it's that extreme because mum died just before camera phones became a thing. So when I again go back to Nana, I've got literally hundreds of videos of me and Nana, and I hear her voice and I see her face clear as day and her moving. With mum, we don't really have much of that now. Dad put something, didn't he, Emma, in our WhatsApp a few months ago. Like he'd uploaded some really old VCR footage onto DVDs, and mum was in it. And the people I was with, I was showing them, and it was actually really emotional for me. It triggered a lot of things because I had forgotten what mum's voice sounded like. I forgot her expressions, her movements, and to see her moving around and to hear her definitely put the hairs up on my back. And it's weird. So it all clearly sits in the subconscious, but in my conscious awareness, I'd forgotten what she sounded like. And when I heard it, it was like, bang, there it is. And it's like that childhood trigger. But yeah, these videos, me and Emma were like, I think one of them's at our birthday party. I remember we were like 4 or 5.
They're amazing. And do you know what, Sam? I sat in my hotel room in London on my own, and Dad sent, about 5 hours of footage.
Oh yeah, it was brutal. It was like, let's have some more. Have some more.
And I loved it. I sat there and just watched it on loop. I was like, I can watch this again, and then I'm going to rewind and watch that bit again. And even seeing Sam and Ben when they were little and the way we were together as siblings, because we've got an older brother called Ben, even that, it was just lovely. And like you, Sam, it triggered so many nice, it made me feel closer to mum because in many ways I've forgotten my memories of her. I've forgotten. And I've always been interested to know if, because I don't have a woman now in my world, I've always been interested to know if for you and Ben, and even for Dad, if having me helps or is in any way reminds you of mum.
I mean, you're a bit of a nightmare, aren't you? But
yes,
always looking after you, kid. But no, look, I think and a lot of people who knew mum, who were maybe mum's age and now know you, there's a lot of mum in you, I think, and there's a lot of your personality, but also I think your looks and the way you act. And I think mum, or you reminded me of mum when I watched those videos. But I think it's nice that I'm reminded through you, I guess. Definitely.
Sam mentioned earlier that he dealt with some feelings of guilt of like walking out if you felt too fast or too early than your mum the night before. Have either of you ever had a conversation about the different feelings of guilt that you feel? Because I feel like guilt, we've talked about this before, haven't we? Guilt and grief is so paramount. Is there anything that you feel guilty about when it comes to your mum?
Loads. There's loads of stuff. I don't know if I said it on the original podcast at the start of season 2. And I don't know if Sam knows this, but when Mum was dying, I know that she said to Nana, she walked in and she said, "Where have you been? I'm dying." And she didn't say it in front of us, but she said that to Nana. And then she said, "I just want to be a good mum and a good daughter." And I feel guilt that she passed away thinking she was neither of those things. And actually, they were probably the jobs that she did better than anything else. And I'll never get the chance to sit with her and say, "I just want you to know, please, that you were a good mum," because, you know, she laid the foundation in her 18 years. She really did, didn't she?
And you're both brilliant. I mean, she did a good job, didn't she?
I've never heard that. So I think even now I'm learning things that you heard that I didn't. And I think a lot of that was probably Emma, wasn't it? I was already spending a lot of time at Dad's around the corner, so maybe I missed the true in depth of what was going on that you had, because you always stayed at Mum's more than me.
Yeah. And I know, obviously being at Mum's, I know when Mum was weak and vulnerable, I won't go into detail, but I know that things happened that I felt guilt about, and I sometimes wish that I was older, wiser and better equipped to deal with it. I don't feel that I ever provided a space for her to feel safe in. And I know Nana and Grandad and Ben, because Sam, I'm sure you'll agree, Ben really shouldered the bulk of the burden because...
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Ben, because obviously he's a few years older than you both, isn't he?
Yeah, I think Ben definitely shoulders a lot. But in terms of kind of what I blame myself for, I think a lot of mine was after Mum died, actually. I know I had said it, that I left early on the final day, but I think as a 17, 18-year-old lad, I was oblivious, and maybe chose to be oblivious to what was going on. And I think I hadn't heard what Emma had heard. So I'd seen it all before. It sounds so brutal, but 13, 14, she got better then. She'll get better again. I think a lot of my, within myself was actually, it sounds really strange, but I had this obsession of going to the grave every day. I don't know if you remember this, Emma.
You went there with Domino's Pizza one night,
oh,
didn't you? After
just sat and cried at Domino's with my mate Will, who I think he cried more than me on the pizza, actually. But for
salty
for a long time, I couldn't let a day go by without going to the grave, and it took me a lot of psychological willpower to start to say Mum, because I felt I'd do Mum an injustice if I didn't go every day. So
you still have so much to say at that age, don't you? And like, that's the kind of thoughts that I had as well. Like, obviously I was only 19 and like, was I 20? One of the two. But like, I still had so much to say to my mum. So like, I used to, I still do sometimes, like lie in bed, say like Mum out loud and actually talk to her, because there are so many things that you didn't get a chance to say then, and things that you regret, and things that you wish that you'd been nicer about, or things that you wish you could say to them and stuff. So,
but interestingly, I would actively avoid normally going to the grave, and the same with Nana, because I find it a real stark reality when I see a slab with their name on it. And so I kind of have in my mind said, you know, they're not there, they're within you, they're part of you. So it's interesting the different takes on that, because that offered me the reassurance that any situation I was going into or anywhere I was never alone, because they were there. But I really, to this day, and I've never told anyone this, but I struggle looking at a grave. I can't deal with like reading Nana's or Mum's name on it. I hate it. And so I will try and leave as quickly as I can.
I think I'd be the same, you know. For some reason, we scattered my mum's ashes at the same grave where her mum was buried and a lot of her other family. We haven't got a gravestone there. We haven't got her name written on anything. And I think I'd be the same as you if there was. I do want to put something there at some point, because I think it's important for future generations. But I think going there and seeing that name and that death day, and kind of, I can imagine
it's
that
a
being
real,
very in your
it's
face.
a hit of reality, isn't it? And it, you know, as beautifully designed as, you know, a headstone is, it's not my mum and it's not my Nana, and it's just their life. And actually, there's so much life within these two dates that you're reading on a headstone that no one walking past would necessarily know. And I keep that up here and in here, and
I think for me, knowing, it sounds odd, they're under the ground. You know, I mean, I know Mum was buried, Nana was cremated. I think that gives me a closeness. But
it's nice to have a space, I think, that's dedicated to them. And like, if yours is in your bed looking at videos, and that's your space, isn't it? Like, I think everybody's individual grieving space is different.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd be so interested to know, like, so obviously my brothers are 7 years, 9 years older than me, and I've never had a conversation like this
Really?
about grief with them. Yeah, we don't talk about it. And like I found out recently, my eldest brother, he deleted my mum's number like days after she died off his phone. I've still got it. Like I won't delete it. And obviously I talk about grief a lot, but my brothers, when we're with each other, we don't really. If we do, it's like a one word. But similar to you, Sue, I don't think we would ever talk about the day that it happened and
I think it's
those kind of nitty gritty feelings.
It's easier. I agree with Emma. Like, I feel like probably Kat, you, when we've been on walks and stuff, I've probably told you more detail than Emma, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? Maybe I don't know. It's just so personal to everyone in the family that you find your release outside.
But there's an expectation, isn't there? People kind of say to you, "Oh, you get so much closer to your family after you lost someone," and maybe for some people that is because they talk about it. For some people, it might be because they get closer because they've realised the value of family, but they don't. That's probably similar with you two, but they don't talk about grief. And there's people that actually, unfortunately, just completely kind of implode when something like that happens. But one of my nicest memories of you, Sam, talking about your mum, is when you drove us both to her old house on the estate in Rudheath, and you were like talking about like different things in the house and your neighbours and stuff and memories from when you were younger. And I think it is true. Sometimes it's just natural to be able to open up to other people. And if somebody is listening and they are newly bereaved, I think don't feel a pressure to feel like you have to have your family as the people that are the ones you speak to.
Talk to whoever you feel you're most comfortable talking to.
I think you find that quite common. I bet if you asked other grieving people, they'll probably find more solace in their friends than their family. But I think the closest me and Emma have got to that is trying to pull the number 6 sign off Mum's house, Emma, that was cemented on that. Do you remember that special fairy?
Yeah, that's still there now. Yeah,
we can't get it off. We've tried, haven't we?
No, Sam was like, I've got this plan. If we go in the middle of the night and we put balaclavas on, we can get it off. I was like, Sam, that's theft. And if we get caught, we can get in trouble.
It was my mum's.
Yeah, it's rightly ours. So basically, we lived at number 6, and Mum loved fairies, and she had a special number 6 with a plaque on it. But it had been so well drilled into the wall.
It was cemented on.
It was cemented, yeah. So we couldn't get it off to take it with us when we sold the house, which means, and nor has the current owner, because it's still there now.
Yeah, that's the thing.
How often do you drive past Mum's house, Sam?
I'll probably go down there, I don't know, once every couple of months. I mean, it was really nice for me, obviously. The next door neighbour who I grew up with, his family still live there. So when he's back, I'll go around, and it's really hard. I'm like, I don't know what the people living there now must think of me, because I'm like the ultimate nosy Parker, just staring through, like, they've still got that, they've still got this. But it brings back a lot of memories, some good, some bad, because obviously Mum was in the hospital bed downstairs for the last, I think, was it weeks, Emma, or even months of her life?
Months, yeah, I think it was last months, really.
So it's mixed emotions.
A question that I got from somebody that follows the podcast on Instagram about sibling grief was whether either of you kind of approached your health differently after loss. So whether one of you is more inclined or like more worried about impending death, and whether somebody else hasn't found that effect. And I think that's definitely the case.
Yeah.
Here.
I mean, with me, do you know what? This is quite well timed, because Emma messaged me last week thanking me for all I've done to get her into a good health routine. But actually, I think I said to Emma, that's your own doing. You might have seen me do it, but you've embedded that in. But you know what I've said, Kat, 100%. I know that the irrational fear of getting cancer, of dying at 48, and it's not obsessive. I think I've been through an obsessive phase for that reason. But obviously now it's my job. But even at the core of my job, I remind people that lifestyle diseases are a thing, and we can never know how Mum got cancer, and I would never even think about going into pondering it. But yeah, I think definitely what spurred me on into this life of health was driven by that, and also that my colitis, my bowel disease, was a cause of the stress of that.
One thing I want to ask both of you is, do you have any advice to people in a similar position to you guys who have siblings, a way maybe to instigate that conversation, or even just general advice on how they should feel about their sibling in grief?
Well, one thing I've learned today is there's a lot that we didn't know, even to this day, 13 years on, 31 years of age. So I don't know. Maybe it would, if I'd looked back at what I would have found easy to do, maybe writing it in a letter form. Do you know what I mean? Just to lay it out there, because I think it's being looking at someone in your family and talking about it. It's a difficult thing. Writing it, it's said in a lot of areas of our lives, and to write stuff down is a lot easier. So maybe write it down, lay out if you want to talk about it or not. You know, I think maybe Emma got the feeling that I didn't want to talk it back then, and she was pretty right. So I think it's just clarity more than anything.
I think remembering it's a process, isn't it?
And also that, as you know, shown in mine and Sam's approaches, you're not the same. Don't expect
twins.
that even twins are not the same. Don't expect your sibling to want to grieve or talk about it in the same way you do, and don't put the pressure on yourself to feel you have to talk about it in the same way your sibling does if you have a sibling that's really open about it. But I would say if you do decide, I'd like to talk about it, maybe quite literally say to your sibling, can we talk about the death of our mum or dad? Can we talk about it? And then maybe go to a quiet place. I know there's a cafe near us that's a lovely cafe that overlooks the church where mum is, and me and Sam have been there a few times. It was Sam that introduced me to it, and I know, for example, that if we were sat on a bench there, me and Sam, that is the kind of place where I think we'd both feel we could open up and talk about the details of it a little more. So maybe find a space if you both decide you do want to talk about it. Go there.
What's obvious there, though, even though we're twins, even we see the world differently and we respond differently. And if twins can respond that differently, then siblings who aren't twins can probably respond even more differently. So I guess how I see the world is still very different to how you see the world, isn't it?
Yeah. And also, just if you look at your sibling and think, how are they coping so much better than me? Which you will want them to be coping, of course you will, but don't think that just because they seem to be coping better than you, they are. They will. Nobody grieves. Nobody loses such a huge, nobody has such a big loss without feeling that the weight of that impact. And in whatever way, they are processing that and they are experiencing that in their own way. And just because they might not on the surface appear to be struggling doesn't mean they're not underneath. So 100%. Ask them if they want to talk or if they want help, I'd say.
Definitely.
So my final question to you, Sam, is I asked Emma this on our first podcast together of the season, but what is one of your kind of favourite memories of your mum? Like, how do you remember her?
So it might sound really odd. My last memory of mum, specifically of her not being in hospital, was I needed to have a routine operation to remove a lump from my chest. It was a benign lump and I didn't want to do it, and mum was like, you do this for me, please, you do this for me. And that was one of the last things that she said, and that sticks with me, and I'm glad I had that operation, because then obviously she went on to die. But in terms of memories, it's hard for me because it's been that long. I think I rely more on the videos that Dad's pulled out. I know that sounds really sad, and I think I didn't go on a lot of holidays that Emma went on with Mum where you'd have those moments. And actually, I'm looking at the photo now that Emma had printed for me in my bedroom, and that's probably one of the oldest photos I've got with Mum, and I'm like 5. So a lot of people think my mum died when I was like 5 or 6. I'm like, no, it was 18. But
I was a fully grown adult.
yeah, it's just there wasn't really the camera phones there, and that was the only time back then when you'd get photos. So yeah, it's more her telling me to get an operation, which is odd.
Still valid.
Yeah, it really is. It is. And it would be interesting one day, Sam, for us to sit down and share our own memories of Mum, because I think as we spoke with each other, there'd probably more memories would unfold, because I have like cognitive block. Like I can't remember a lot of stuff about Mum.
They do say memory is like a muscle though, isn't it? And if Sam, obviously, he said, his coping mechanism is to kind of, not in your mind. So like if you kind of live your life like that, you're less likely to be able to kind of flex that muscle, aren't you?
I think there's certain,
never too late.
There's certain triggers as well, though, isn't there? You made me think that, Emma. I remember years ago I was training someone in the gym, and a lady walked past me with a perfume on. I don't know the name of the perfume. Well, it was Mum's, put it that way. And automatically my mind exploded with memories of mum, and it actually stopped me to the point where the client was like, "Are you okay?" And I had to go over to the woman and ask her. God knows what it was called, but I asked her specifically. That's be weird, but what's your perfume? So I
Smell
guess
like my dead mum.
Do you know what though? I used to. That is Dolce & Gabbana, that perfume. With the one with the red lid. And I used to for a very long time. I couldn't afford it, so I just used to go into Boots, spray it on the test stick, and sniff it. I just used to walk around smelling it to remind me of
my
mum.
My mum was an old school Yves Saint Laurent gal.
Yes.
So like,
Did you do the same?
Yeah, the really old ones.
Yeah.
Really strong. I'm not gonna lie, I would never wear it.
Very
It's
strong.
pungent.
Yeah.
But like, if I smell it, it smells like her.
But smell and music as well. I know mum was a massive Bruce Springsteen
yeah,
fan.
you both love that.
And
I
we
was just
love
going to say
Springsteen.
that. Sure.
Yeah.
But the
So,
triggers,
yeah.
aren't they? I think that's the point. It's associative learning. You can hear, see, or smell something, and all of a sudden, those memories that you thought you'd lost come back up to the surface.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming on and for talking to each other.
I've learned a lot
lovely.
about my own twin sister.
Aw.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you
No
so
problem.
much.
And
Love
if anybody wants to get in touch to talk about their own experience or to share their own experience of sibling grief, then you can reach out and chat to us.
Yeah, you can email us hello@deadparentclub.co.uk or find us on Instagram @deadparentclubpodcast, and we're on Facebook and Twitter as well.
So thank you so much, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
Bye.
Bye.